Weird Tales, November 1923, Volume 2, Issue 4. Greetings, dear listeners. We're back once again for our monthly exploration of Weird Tales. Weird Tales, the unique magazine, this time examining the November 1923 issue, Volume 2, Issue 4. And Lovecraft is back. Kinda, sorta, maybe. The November issue saw the appearance of The Invisible Monster by Sonia H. Green. And if you don't know who she was Mrs. H.P. Lovecraft. The marriage of Sonia and Howard is outside the scope of this short video, but here are some basic facts about the Mrs. Lovecraft. Sonia Haft Green Lovecraft Davis was born in the Ukraine on March the 16th, 1883, and was of the Jewish faith. Ironically, Lovecraft married her, in spite of his anti-Semitism, in New York in 1924. The couple soon experienced financial difficulties exacerbated by Lovecraft's inability to find work, inability to look for work. Sonia moved to Cleveland for work on January the 1st, 1925, and the pair eventually agreed to an amicable divorce, but as Lovecraft failed to complete the necessary paperwork, Sonia was legally his wife until his death in 1937, which was embarrassing, as she had remarried in 1936. The Invisible Monster, sometimes known as the Horror at Martin's Beach, is generally credited to Lovecraft, even though it appears under Sonia's name. It certainly reads like a Lovecraft yarn. It's a rather pedestrian story of the discovery and revenge of a mysterious sea monster. I don't want to say any more about it, as I don't want to be a spoiler, but to me, the story is Dagon meets the Moonbog, if you're familiar with those Lovecraft stories. I put links to audio recordings of The Invisible Monster in the description, as well as an audio recording of Sonia Green's other known piece of weird fiction, 4 O'Clock. If The Invisible Monster reads like Lovecraft, the poetic and atmospheric 4 O'Clock has an entirely different feel. It was apparently written by Green from an idea supplied by Lovecraft. If you listen to both stories, you will clearly hear the stylistic differences. Allow me to draw your attention to a few more stories of interest. This issue's masterpiece of weird fiction is Poe's famous The Telltale Heart. I've even done my own version of this classic story here on the channel, which I will link to in the description. Seabury Quinn, who created the psychic detective Jules de Grandin, also wrote factual articles on true crime and occult subjects for Weird Tales, with this month's entry being The Grave Robbers. Now, I was expecting Quinn to rehash Burke and Hare and other classic ghoul cases, but instead he focused on contemporary accounts from the early 1920s of burglaries and fraud connected to funerals and burials, which makes sense given that the author was an expert on the law governing funerals and undertakers. It was mildly diverting and can be found as Chapter 2 of an audiobook called Weird Crimes, narrated by Ben Tucker. Link in description. The two other yarns for which I could find audio recordings smacked more of naturalism than supernaturalism, albeit they had ironic endings. The Death Pit by Oscar Shizgal. Oscar Shizgal is a grim and rather plodding account of a murder, while The Survivor by Edwin G. Wood is the story of two men lost in the desert and, spoiler alert, only one survives. According to Ben Tucker, narrator of the Death Pit audiobook, Oscar Shizgal, what a great name. Oscar Shizgal wrote over 4,000 stories and was published in such prestigious magazines as Collier's and Reader's Digest. The Death Pit was the first of two stories he wrote for Weird Tales, the other being In Cashless Garden, which appeared in May 1927. He lived from 1901 to 1984. Alas, I was unable to find any information about Edwin G. Wood, author of The Survivor. So if anyone knows anything about him, please share your knowledge in the comments. The cover artist is listed as unknown, but has been identified as someone named Washburn, who only did this one cover and of whom nothing is known. The story it illustrates from the November issue is The Closed Room by Maebelle McCalment. Maebelle McCalment. I would have sworn the story being illustrated was The Telltale Heart, and have put a link to the cover in the description so you can look for yourself. The complete table of contents will also be found in the description for you to check out. And you can let me know if you find a yarn you would like me to narrate on this channel. Once again, the tales in the November issue fall short in the weird department, and of the 4 items I listened to, only The Invisible Monster involved the supernatural. It was also an example of early Lovecraft when he was still learning his craft. Lovecraft learning his craft. Lovecraft's craft. And it failed to really engage me. But I invite you to listen to or read The Invisible Monster and let me know your assessment. And I also invite you to consider the following question. Will Weird Tales ever start to feature, Weird Tales? Please stay tuned for my review of the next issue, January 1924. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So, again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,500 subs. Till midnight. Cheers.